Hi, I'm Anthony Mangano, your host for City of Churches. You know, every once in a while we like to get out of the borough of Brooklyn, and we're in the middle of Manhattan right here. You know what? We're in Little Italy to visit Old St. Patrick's Cathedral. That's right, Old St. Patrick's Cathedral, before there was the new St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue. Now, as grand and fantastic as it is, this was here first, and this is a beautiful church with a lot of history and a great neighborhood. And there's so many things going on here, and it's streaming with tourists. A good buddy of mine, Tony Danza, we know, owns a cheese store, which is amazing. He owns a cheese store now. Just look at all those restaurants down there. We all want that authentic Italian feel from years ago. Now, even if the Italian language is not heard that often anymore, there are still authentic Italian places to see and visit, like the Paulos right here. They've been around since 1925. People come from all over just to come here and get cheese. And there's Ferrara's Bakery Pastry Shop. Now, as you can see, 1 block away from Mulberry Street, and we're almost in Chinatown. And you can see how the things change from the Italian restaurants and shops to the Chinese restaurants and stuff. That's Manhattan, baby. Everybody's together. Come on, I want to show you something else. Now, recently we interviewed Father Sakano inside, and I'm going to be dressed a little differently. I don't want you to get confused, but it's really about 93 degrees out right now. When we shot the previous episode, it was raining, but you'll get it. So come on inside. It's a great time. Right on cue. Well, here we are in Little Italy, and I'm with Monsignor Donald Sakano. Hello, Father. Thank you so much for inviting us to what a beautiful church. And I'm going to get to that, and I'm going to say the Basilica of St. Patrick's Old Cathedral.
Got it right.
Did you say there was something else affiliated with this church before?
Well, yes, we've been married, if you will, to another church just south of here on Mulberry Street, historic Little Italy, the Church of the Most Precious Blood, which is the national shrine of San Gennaro.
Was this the original church?
Yes, this was the original St. Patrick's Cathedral. So way back in, picture it, 1809, when this area of New York City, just north of Canal, Wall Street, where the Dutch city was, this was pasture. In 1809, the cornerstone was laid for the St. Patrick's Cathedral.
The St. Patrick's,
yes.
The original St. Patrick's.
The original St. Patrick's Cathedral. There was only one other church in New York at the time, and that was St. Peter's on Barclay Street.
Was that the first, or was this the first?
That was the first church. No longer standing. The parish still is there, thriving in Lower Manhattan. And then when the Pope made this a diocese in 1808, they decided they needed the cathedral. So the pastor there, who was a Jesuit by the name of Anthony Coleman, decided that this would be a good place to build the cathedral. And so they laid the cornerstone in 1809. It took 6 years, however, to build the church. There were very few Catholics then. Church was very poor, and the War of 1812. So it took 6 years, and it was finished in 1815.
I look outside, and before I get to the wall, I'd like to know the name of the architect that designed this.
Joseph Mangano.
Almost like my last name, Mangano, Mangan.
There you
my
go.
brother's
Maybe
name is Joseph Mangano, Joseph Mangan. That's why it rang a bell a little bit to me.
Mangan's, I think, is French.
Now, it's Gothic?
Yes, it's Gothic inside. Actually, if you approach the church from outside, it looks like, very plain. A Quaker meeting house, maybe. It's just right?
It almost looks like it would be somewhere else.
Yes, yes. It astonishes people, actually, when they come into the front doors and then they're greeted with this Gothic extravaganza, if you will,
It's like opening the doors to something that you would never believe is inside.
Well, it was a little bit more elaborate when they designed it. There was a major fire here in 1860.
That's what I was going to ask you about.
Yeah. So, and it was still the cathedral then. It was still St. Patrick's Cathedral. The new cathedral was under construction uptown then, but they decided to rebuild it rapidly. So the ceiling of our church looks very much like the one at St. Patrick's.
Yes, it does. Yes, I can see that very much.
And I thought when I first came here that they imitated this ceiling when they built the new cathedral, right? But actually the opposite is true. So when the ceiling came down here due to the fire in 1866, and they had to rebuild rapidly, they used the design that was underway uptown.
There's a wall. I've known that wall. Everybody knows.
Everybody knows our wall.
Can you explain to our viewers about this?
Sure.
Like, why was it designed?
Well, I hope your viewers come and visit.
I want to recommend that they do.
Yeah, they won't be sorry. There's a lot of history here, a lot of culture, and a lot of good food because we're in Little Italy. The wall was built in the late 1830s, and it was actually built to defend the church against detractors, and at the time they called them nativists. These were people who feared the Roman Catholic invasion into the country and felt that it was a foreign element and should be expelled. So actually one church had already been burned down, and that was St. Mary's on Grand Street. And so the menacing of this church caused its leaders to build a wall. Everybody loves the wall around the church.
It's a landmark.
Yeah, it is a landmark, actually.
Do you have a website for this church?
We do. Do you want me to tell you what it is?
Yes, say it right now to my viewers. I want them to know this.
Okay, it's www.oldcathedral.org. And you can find lots about us, including access to our tour guide company.
See, that's great,
which
because
is Tommy's New York.
Tommy's, because there's a lot of people would be interested
in right,
coming
exactly.
here, because since we're talking about history of the church, we both know one of the most famous movies in history, being Italian, was Godfather 1, and I know Godfather 3 was shot here.
Right.
To our viewers, if I'm correct here, in Godfather 1, it was the scene where Michael Corleone is becoming Godfather.
Correct. It's a baptism scene.
Your masses, they consist of, you were just saying, young people, your masses, do you have like a Spanish mass, an Asian mass?
We do. We have a mass in Spanish. There is a Dominican population that moved into this area in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and are still here. It's hard to move into this area now unless you have a lot of money. Downtown Manhattan in a trendy area, so it's not an easy place to rent or buy in. But we also have a Chinese mass. We have a priest here who's been here over 35 years, and the population, which is also young people in their 20s and 30s, come from a wide area, metropolitan area, for mass here on Sunday mornings in Chinese.
Is there an Italian mass?
There isn't a mass in Italian.
I'm just curious because we are in
Every
Italy. I
mass,
have to ask you, is there an
But every mass has a tinge of Italy in it.
A tinge of Italy?
Just by its, yes.
Well, look where we are.
Just by its very nature, just because it's here.
Well, I want to ask you some questions about the stained glass windows, but we got to take a break, so we'll be right back. So can you tell us a little bit about the stained glass windows here?
Well, most of them were done in the 20th century, actually, and they're very fine glass. We recently had them restored, but not only the glass, but the frames of the windows. And this may seem a little boring to your listening public, I don't know, but we were fascinated by the process because they had to be hand-hewn. So all of the dark areas that you can see around the color in the glass is all wood that was hand-hewn by craftsmen of our era. And it took 2 years to do these windows.
No, that's not boring. It's kind of fascinating.
It is.
We talk about it a lot.
Yeah, what's fascinating about it is that there are craftspeople, that
do this.
are still around that do these things that most people have forgotten how to do. A friend of ours, Martin Scorsese, who grew up in this neighborhood.
Yes, that's true. I forgot about
Visited recently and stood just about where we're sitting now and reminisced about these windows. So he actually came in contact with his artistic self here in this church. I'm sure there are other places too, but there's the combination of things that were here, not the least of which is God, and the images of mystery and of sin and redemption, of light and darkness were here for him and helped shape, his future in cinematography. And he stood here and, commented on these windows and what wondrous capacity they gave him as a youngster.
Most of his movies, they could be graphic, but there's always a meaning at the end.
Correct.
the life some of these characters led, they turned out really bad.
That's right. That can happen if you don't have a light in your life. Then there's darkness.
Yeah.
And so he's got caricatures of people who are bumping around and bumping into each other and the sharp edges of the world because they don't have a light. So he's always searching for the light.
I think we all are.
Yes, of course. There is a connection between the darkness of the themes of those movies and the bright light that Christ brings to people's lives, ultimately. Mean Streets, which is a movie that Martin Scorsese
did, yes, again.
Did in his early career and filmed partially here in this church.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, I didn't know that.
There you go.
Thank you for bringing that up for us. Monsignor, I have a question for you. Why would you call a church St. Patrick's Cathedral in the middle of Little Italy?
Well, because it wasn't Little Italy in 1809. The Italian immigration didn't really occur until later in the 19th century. So if you're familiar with the great expansion of the country and the city, keeping in mind that in 1800, the population of New York City was 75,000 people.
Oh, wow.
In 1900, only 100 years later, 5 million. Covering
That's some
5
jump.
boroughs. That's some jump.
Sure.
Okay? And that's accounted for because, in part, of the enormous impouring of people from Europe and other parts of the world, but principally Europe. And in the forepart of the 19th century, in the early 1800s, from Ireland. The potato famine, the great hunger there, brought hundreds of thousands, millions of people, actually, to our shores. And that caused the church to prosper, the diocese to be created in 1808, the cathedral built here in 1809 to 1815, and it was named after the patron of Ireland because the principal population at that time were Irish. And then in the middle of the 19th century, the Italian population started coming over to this neighborhood and other parts of Europe. But the story of the mix between Irish and the Italians is fascinating here. It really is, and it's the subject of a lot of books and movies, and it's fascinating.
My wife's part Irish. I'm not, but she's part Irish, so I know.
That's part of the story, of the great mix of cultures that produced, I happen to like to think, this great church as it is today.
There's a cemetery here.
Yeah, the church was built on a cemetery, as a matter of fact. Yes. So when the church was very poor in 1808, and they looked around for where they're going to build their cathedral, which is a word, by the way, that means, you know what it means?
No, I don't. Explain
So
this.
most people think that the word cathedral means a big church or an elaborate one. It simply means chair. The word
Chair.
cathedral is a Greek word, comes from a Greek word cathedra, which simply means seat or chair.
Okay.
So it's where the bishop's chair is located. So wherever the bishop's chair is located,
That's the
that's a cathedral. It could be a hut.
Speaking of chairs, you mentioned something to us. I have to bring it up. Where are these chairs from?
I don't know.
No, you
No,
don't.
I'm kidding. No.
You do.
I mentioned it to you before the interview. Okay, so Cardinal Dolan visited here, and we just had metal folding chairs in the sanctuary because we just had finished renovating it. And he said, I have a set of chairs that we used for the papal visit when Pope Francis was here last year, and we don't know what to do with them. Would you like them? And I said, sure. So we have
So there's some
4 of
history in
chairs.
these chairs
Yeah.
you and I are sitting in.
That's right.
Now I understand there's a
Yeah.
crypt here?
Yes, so the church was built right on top of a cemetery, actually. So the graves that were there were preserved. So we found tombstones that predate the cathedral in the late 1700s and early 1800s. Right, it's very, very, and very, I must say, inspiring. There's something about knowing that you're telling the gospel story and you're celebrating the sacraments of God's presence now over, the remains of those who built the church and were your spiritual forefathers. There's something really, inspiring about that, and I can understand why early Christians would seek out, the remains of the martyrs in the catacombs, to celebrate Mass in the early days.
Arguably, this is one of the most historic Catholic sites in New York. Here is Honest John Kelly resting in peace underneath this incredible basilica, and he's from Tammany Hall fame. We have the O'Connor family vault, which Mr. O'Connor was a presidential candidate in the 19th century. Right around the corner, we've got General Thomas Eckert, who was a confidant of Abraham Lincoln's. As a matter of fact, Abraham Lincoln drafted a good part of the Emancipation Proclamation in his office. And right around the corner, we have the first Bishop of New York and the Delmonico family vault.
When and why was Old St. Pat's became a basilica?
Because the cardinal wanted it. So he visited one day, and he took me aside, and he said, Don, that's my first name. He said, what do you think about making the old cathedral a basilica? And I said, sure, right? And then we have to apply to Rome, and so I think the cardinal felt that the diocese, the Archdiocese of New York, that didn't have a basilica should have a basilica.
And what better place than the Old
What
St.
better
Pat's?
place? That's right, exactly. So that's that story in a nutshell.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Now, I want to take a break, but there's a lot of questions I want to go up on the altar and ask you about.
Okay.
So be prepared.
Sure.
We'll be right back. Well, we're back, and we're here on the altar of Old St. Patrick's Cathedral. This is beautiful, Father.
Yes,
This
it
really
is.
is.
Mm-hmm.
These statues are amazing. They're so, it looks like they were hand carved. They're like, I feel like Michelangelo designed these.
Yes. They look both artistic and real at the same time.
They really do.
And so we have this sense of a presence, an apostolic presence, reminds us of our heritage that goes back 2,000 years. These are the original evangelizers. These are the disciples of Jesus. These are the people who proclaimed the gospel to an alien world, a foreign world. And so we're very proud to have them as part of our assembly.
I have to ask you, as we're looking how beautiful this is, now the tabernacle.
Well, now we're standing in the presence of our Lord, who is residing in our tabernacle under the appearance of bread. And the tabernacle itself is a replica of the old cathedral.
That's what I was going to ask you about.
Yeah, as it originally looked.
That's how it originally looked.
Exactly. There was a fire here, as I described earlier, in 1863 that changed the church's appearance. And so we reconstructed it. The design around the tabernacle is called a tester, and it's original to the church, and so we're very proud of it and these statues. And I might add that when we did the renovation recently, we uncovered paint that had been applied to the statues in 1970, which was a terrible time.
We were discussing
Yeah,
before.
a terrible time for liturgical.
I don't know why they did that.
They did, and it broke the hearts of a lot of people in the church, actually, in the parish, that they painted over the statues. But we discovered when we were restoring the statues, we thought we were just going to clean them, but lo and behold, we found original paint underneath.
You have to say to yourself, what were they thinking?
I don't think they did a lot of thinking in 1970.
No, they didn't, because this is breathtaking.
Yeah.
Father, I always ask this in every church I go to now. The Basilica. What is one of the most unique things here that you'd like to show our viewers?
Gee, I think, thinking that it is a basilica, the symbol of a basilica is an umbrella, actually. It's an umbrellino in Italian. And yes, here it is right over here.
This would be the most unique thing here at
Well,
St.
it's
Pat's?
unique in the sense that only a basilica will have this symbol. And a basilica is actually a term that comes from ancient Rome. It's a form of architecture, actually. But the great basilicas in ancient Rome, buildings, were turned into churches in the Christian era. And then from that point on, the Pope from time to time would nominate a church anywhere in the world to be a basilica, which has a special meaning for him in terms of the role the church played in the past and its significance into the future. And so, as I described before, Cardinal Dolan asked the Pope to make this church a basilica, which is honorific, actually. It's like being a Monsignor, okay? A priest is a priest is a priest, but some people are given a little badge of honor some significance and call them Monsignor. So Basilica is a church that has some significance, and the symbol is this umbrella, which is meant to be here ready for the Pope's arrival. So if he ever comes, symbolically, we're supposed to take the umbrella and go out and meet him in the streets.
Oh.
So it's half open, ready for him, so we're
And then it opens all the way.
We're umbrella ready. We're umbrella ready.
Umbrella ready.
We're umbrella ready for the Pope.
That's
to
interesting.
come. Yes, and it's decorated always with the colors of Rome. So if you visit Rome, you'll notice a lot of banners that are red and gold or red and yellow, and surrounded by the emblems of our church, the Archdiocese, the Pope's coat of arms. Yeah, right. And then next to it is a little cluster of bells that accompany the Pope when he comes in. All right.
Okay.
So, yeah. So can I ring it for you? It
Please.
makes. Yeah. It just makes a.
If you can catch it, go right ahead.
Yeah. So.
Oh, that's
that.
great. So you would ring
Kids
that?
love it, of course, right? And so you ring that when the Pope is coming in. That's right.
We missed something very good, and we'll pick it up. The crucifix.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes, it is.
I mean, that to me is like amazing. It's so big. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yep. Yep. It centers people. It both is a symbol of reversal in life, of what can be negative, but also what's positive. So the Christian challenge is to look at their dark places in their lives and their negatives, their challenges, and yet see right in back of it the positive, the light, the redemption. And that's what the cross does. Look at a cross, but you need to see beyond the cross to the resurrection. In our own lives, we have to do the same things.
Before I sign off, I want you to tell our viewers one more time about the website so they can look it up and come down and take a tour of the neighborhood.
We'd love to have them visit us. Our website is www.oldcathedral.org.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of City of Churches. Now, Monsignor, I want to thank you so much for inviting us here, because it's such a beautiful place. And the fact that you told us about your website and there's tours, and I really want the people to come down and see this, because there's a lot of history here. So if you want to follow us, you can get us on netnewyork.tv, Facebook or Twitter, or you can write into us at City of Churches at 1712 10th Avenue, Brooklyn, New York, 11215. Until next time, I'm Anthony Mangano with Monsignor Sakano here at Old St. Patrick's Basilica. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you, and we'll see you on the next one.